It was the summer before my second year at college. I had made a habit of house sitting for the winters, an older couple who were regular vacationers, often leaving town for weeks at a time. I didn't mind. Honestly, it paid well, and the house was only a 10-minute walk from my university. At first, it seemed like an easy gig. They had 4 cats, all of them fat, lazy creatures who mostly slept through the day, and a spacious house that felt strangely empty, even when I was there alone. The first few nights were uneventful. I kept to my routine, checking the cats, ensuring the house was locked, and making myself a cup of tea. It was the kind of quiet that usually settled over you like a heavy blanket, the kind of quiet that lets you think too much. But it wasn't until the 5th night that something changed. I had just finished watching a movie in the guest room when I heard the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. It was late, around midnight, and I had made sure every door and window was locked before I settled in. But there it was again, the sound of a door slowly pushing open, then the soft patter of paws on the floorboards. I figured it was one of the cats, maybe the ginger one named Benny, who had a tendency to sneak around the house looking for food. But when I went to check, I found that Benny was curled up at the foot of the bed, fast asleep, and the door to the kitchen was standing wide open. That was strange. I could have sworn I had closed it. The house was old, the kind of place where the wood creaked and groaned, as if it had its own life. But this felt different. The air had grown colder, and I noticed a strange sensation creeping up my spine. I could have sworn I heard whispering, soft voices, coming from the kitchen. I tried to brush it off, but the unease gnawed at me, like something was watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. I double-checked all the locks again and tried to fall asleep, but sleep wouldn't come. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was holding its breath, that it was listening for something. By the time morning came, I was exhausted, but I still had the feeling that something was wrong. The house felt off. The cats were acting strange too, hissing at nothing, staring at empty corners like they were watching something invisible. When I woke up, the television in the living room was on, playing nothing but static, flickering like it had been on all night. The remote was on the coffee table, untouched. I felt my stomach drop. I spent the next few days checking over everything. The house was locked up tight, but strange things kept happening. Things that shouldn't have been happening. The television turning on by itself. The feeling that someone was just behind me, whispering my name. But the worst was yet to come. One night I decided to go to bed early, just to escape the creeping anxiety that had been eating at me. I shut the door to the guest room, locked it, and settled in under the covers. But before I could even drift off, I heard something, or someone, scratching at the door. The sound was light, almost like a fingernail tapping against the wood. I got up, my heart pounding, and opened the door, half expecting to see one of the cats. There was nothing there, just the empty hallway. But when I turned back to the room, I felt a chill sweep over me. The room was colder than it should have been. I heard the whispering again, this time louder, more distinct. It was coming from the direction of the kitchen. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my things and left. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted out. I never went back to that house again. When I was 17, I thought I had the world figured out. I was still in high school, living under my parents' roof, and to make some extra cash, I had started doing some dog sitting for a friend of my mom's. The job itself was simple. Take care of the dog, keep an eye on the house. But I quickly learned that not all houses are made to be watched. It was a typical spring evening when the oddities began. I was sitting in the living room with my 2 friends, Haley and Sammy, just passing the time. The dog, a large German shepherd named Duke, was lying in the corner, his eyes half closed. We had a couple of drinks just to relax, nothing too serious. But that's when the phone rang. At first I thought it was nothing. I had turned off the ringer, knowing it was late, but the phone still rang, and I couldn't help but feel a prickle of unease. Haley picked up the receiver, and I saw her expression shift from casual amusement to something colder, something more serious. "Hello?" she said, her voice suddenly tight. There was a long pause, a breath. Yes, we'll be there soon." She hung up the phone and turned to Sammy and me. "That was weird," she said almost to herself. "A guy found something of Mrs. Carlson's, her wallet, I think, and he wants us to come get it." We all exchanged uneasy glances. Why was this guy calling us in the middle of the night to come pick up something that could clearly wait? The guy had an odd way of speaking, like he was trying to hide something, like he was nervous. Haley didn't seem as bothered by it as I was. She was always the brave one, the one who didn't get rattled easily. But I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Sammy, sensing my discomfort, suggested we ignore it. But that's when the lights flickered. Just for a moment, but long enough to make me feel something was terribly wrong. That's when the real trouble started. A few hours later, after we'd settled back in with more drinks and less conversation, I heard something. No, someone moving around in the kitchen. It wasn't Duke, who had fallen asleep on the rug. This was something else. I told Haley and Sammy that we should check it out, but they brushed me off. I could tell something wasn't right, something out of place. I got up and crept down the hall, and that's when I saw him, standing just inside the kitchen, staring out the window like he was waiting for something. He was tall, too tall, and his face was hidden in shadow. But there was something about the way he stood there, motionless, like he didn't belong. I didn't wait to find out. I ran back to the living room and locked the door behind me. Sammy followed me a minute later, but Haley stayed behind, too curious for her own good. That was the last time I saw her that night. When the police arrived, the man was gone, and there was no sign of Haley. We never found out who he was or why he had been in that house, but I never dog-sat again after that night. I had always been the kind of person who liked being alone. It was easier that way. No one to judge you, no one to question what you were doing. That's probably why I agreed to house sit for the Moore family. They had a beautiful home, big and imposing, with towering oak trees surrounding it, their branches swaying in the wind like something out of a nightmare. The first few days went smoothly. I took care of their dog, a quiet golden retriever named Max, and made sure the house was secure. But after the third night, things began to feel strange. It started with the lights, flickering on and off when there was no storm, no power surges. The kind of thing that makes you start to question your sanity. But it didn't stop there. The real problem was the basement. I had always avoided going down there, but after a few days I decided to check it out. What I found was unsettling, to say the least. The air was thick and musty, and the floorboards creaked under my weight. It wasn't much, a few old boxes and some dusty furniture, but the feeling in that room was enough to make my skin crawl. I had no explanation for it, but I felt like I was being watched. The following night, as I was about to fall asleep, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, slow, deliberate, like someone was pacing outside my door. I told myself it was just the house settling, but the sound was unmistakable. Then I heard the door handle turn, slowly, as if someone were testing it. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. No one was supposed to be there. The house was empty, and yet, something was there, something that didn't belong. I didn't wait around to figure out what it was. I packed my things and ran. The next morning, I called the Moores and told them I couldn't stay any longer. They never returned to that house.